Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for the slightly late start, but I wanted to give as many people as possible the opportunity to join us in the final session of the Corporate Social Opportunity Zone. My name's Jeff Thompson. I'm the founder and executive chair of the Youth Charter, one of the exhibitors of part of the Corporate Social Opportunity Zone. And my aim is to try and suggest to you how we might be able to work together, firstly as a movement, because for the last 20 years, the Sport for Development for Peace movement has been a growing movement and has now become a sector, and that is reflected in this zone. Many would argue that it's an industry. I would like to think that it isn't. Some are new, some have been around for a decade, and some have been around a little longer. But for the last 20 years, there is a recognition that soccer, football, is very much a sport that determines what other sports do in this very important area of engaging young people and the wider community. There are challenges in this work. Many of you who exhibit or will be engaging with the first time with this movement will understand that working with young people and communities is not an easy encounter by way of culture, the social condition and environment in which they are now developing, both locally in the respective communities in which we now participate as a global community, but more importantly, how they will achieve in life through sport, through culture and activity. The economics are always important. We are in an industry that represents many hundreds of millions of dollars, or depending on the currency that you happen to trade in, the global currency is a rich one. It is also worth remembering that most of the players that played, or should I say, benefited from the last transfer window, will have come from communities that most of these agencies will be working in. However, would we be able to attract the economics that we're looking for in order to help us achieve the burning issues? And these are the issues that I feel are still very relevant. Last year at the CSO zone, as part of Soccerex, we launched a Soccer-wise report, an in-depth report that looked at the social, culture and economic issues, challenges and opportunities of the beautiful game and what it could do for good. However, the burning issues are real. Many people consider that the sector or the movement is competing for resource rather than collaborating for resource. Many people would also agree that we are distracted by looking for money on the basis of delivering what we should be doing as part of our day-to-day commitment and passion. Equally, many people would argue that there is another sector and movement that are looking to use sport for all the wrong reasons, because we should not be too morally exclusive in suggesting that sport for development for peace is something that we can only do. But the potential for collaboration and the potential for investment will be something I'll go on to later, and then hopefully engage in a lively debate and discussion, because that's what Soccerex does best. Hopefully you're not too tired or exhausted by the last number of days. Soccer for Good is well established. We know what it can do. It's a vaccine, it's an antidote, and it is and can have a lasting, real and valuable impact. As I said, Soccer for Bad suggests that on the other side of those hearts and minds that we're competing with and for, there are those, and for example, in this country we have coaches, soccer coaches, sports coaches, who are radicalizing young hearts and minds. That is a reality. How do we counter? How do we prevent and intervene before having that toxic currency of disaffected young hearts and minds? So it's something we should always be aware of, on the point I was making earlier of being truly collaborative, working in a partnership and providing a consortium approach that attracts investment as opposed to donation or sponsorship. All valuable, but all too short term. That is the current soccer development community. A large number of agencies, just a few that we have chosen to highlight and share with you, all doing work in this space, expanding on those of us who have been here presenting what we do over the last number of days. But it is not coordinated. And for that reason, it's an even bigger ask of corporate funding institutions as to why they should give us the money as opposed to you the money. It's a simple case of having to make a choice. Does it fit the corporate or institutional grant-giving bodies' aims, objectives? Does it, as a result of that, last for a long period of time? Talking to most of the CSO zone exhibitors, we're looking for 10 years' worth of investment. Most funding streams, if it's by sponsorship, is dependent on the chief exec and a board, who increasingly have to convince shareholders that it's worth that particular cause. So in a global movement of global shift, we have to find other ways. I wanted to give you this example. The Emergency Disaster Relief Committee or the Disaster Emergency Committee meet whenever there's a disaster. I'm sure you might all be aware of this collaboration, this consortia. They sit down, they bring all of their collective skills, knowledge, wisdom and experience to address the disaster in hand. They make a campaign, they raise the money that is required, and then they execute and deliver on that particular appeal. We can do the same, however we don't. And for that reason, a lot of the bigger institutions who could invest say we do not want to be philanthropic, we want to take a long-term relationship, but you have to come together. This is one example of how that is done. However, there are equally critics who would suggest we don't get a report on the impact, socially, culturally, or economically, of that particular relief effort. And I think, again, it's the difference in changing cultural styles of working in this area of development that we start looking at what is donated to what is invested and making sure that there are outputs and outcomes that can produce confidence and further investment. These are the Soccerex CS Zone exhibitors, all of us doing great work, and I've spoken to most of them and asked how they would see the ideal first principle challenge of economics or money being removed so they can get on with the real job of engaging the young people and communities they're committed to. The figure that they've all collaboratively asked or collectively asked for isn't a lot of money. 20 million would be, no, I'm sorry, 30 million would be the amount that I would go to the academy where they're talking about what the sponsors want. And if we had the sponsors here, that would be the ask, that would be the pitch. They would want to know what the return would be, and I'd be confident if we were a consortia that we would be able to get that. Quite simply because with the collective skills that are all complementary, we're not competing in anyone's territory, we all complement, we all add value, and we all can sustain with credible professional delivery and execution what we might be able to do together. But I would say that. Professional soccer, excuse the metaphoric graphical illustration, is what all of those agencies can do if they are collectively pulled together. That's the power of a ball, something round, but something very holistic, very integrated, and all the brands are there. But would they come together for a greater social, cultural, and economic good? Would they be prepared as a sector to come to Soccerex, present to Soccerex on day one, not on the final day, but on day one, suggesting this is what the sector are doing, this is the social, cultural, and economic impact, these are the results of our work, and we're asking the super agents for a 2% top line social offset back into what we require and what we wish to do. And we'll come back the next year of Soccerex, and we will present the work that we're doing, what we've been able to impact, where the challenges are, where the opportunities are, and then see how the industry might respond to us in a positive and more cohesive way. The UN agencies are worth remembering. UNICEF is a contributing exhibitor, and they are arguably the most powerful brand of all of us. Equally, they have the ability to bring together within the UN family of agencies a framework that would help us work more efficiently and more effectively and more sustainably. The 2015 Sustainable Development Goals were originally developed for the African continent. Why, however, with the UN Charter having all UN member countries, aren't we looking at every continent delivering those Sustainable Development Goals? Most of the agencies here can actually deliver at least 6 of the goals that are about to be ratified in the 70th anniversary year of the UN Assembly that will be taking place in New York. Are we aware of it? How are we campaigning? How are we contributing and giving the UN member countries the added value that we can bring through the beautiful game and through sport? Those are the Sustainable Development Goals. From gender to education to health to disability to legacy of major games, to youth unemployment. All the goals are there, to conflict resolution. But many would ask, in what's currently happening in Europe, and to be fair, the International Olympic Committee, President Thomas Bach, announced a 1.5 million fund. Bayern Munich, a football giant in the global footballing community, equally announced a 1 million fund. However, what has been our response as the global football community here in Manchester? What could it have looked like? How would we mobilize ourselves to be able to work cohesively and effectively in meeting what is one of the largest migrating movements of human energy since the Second World War? If sport is for development and it's supposed to have a social impact, it must transcend all 5 continents. It might have been a nice challenge to want to discuss somewhere where the bigger decisions of economics and influence and power are taking place. The potential investment, as I've said, is a huge one. I won't go into the infinite figures that are being looked at, but that just gives you a feel as to what the economic power of the beautiful game can be. There are many interests, many would say vested and conflicted, but nonetheless, they are real. And I fervently believe, after spending much time in looking at how we can get a piece of that pie, is that we need to work out what our ingredients are and work out how we sit around the table and decide how we can go through a 3-course metaphorical delivery of that pie. And if not, create our own pie and then campaign and present it and then lobby. Now, in the issue of women's football, I saw a group of women sat around the table yesterday, and I didn't go near them because I knew they were planning and plotting, because women are very good at that. And I believe that if you get the planning and the strategic timing right, you can make a case and a cause for what I've always said, the ability not to be able to say no. Many people would suggest this is worth doing. However, we've not given them the means by which they can do it well. The transfer window, go back one, the transfer window, as recently closed, saw economic movement in the transfer market of just around $1 billion. The super agents yesterday, I'm told it was a very, very spirited discussion, are always seen as the toxic interface. If we'd have gone to them and asked them again, by the way, from that very talent pool that they are now trading in, having come from the communities that we work in, what would that look like? And for 30 million plus, is it realistic? It's worth remembering when Alan Shearer was transferred from Newcastle to Blackburn Rovers, £100,000 of his transfer deal went to his former youth club. The models and examples are there. We've just never used them and leveraged them as a win-win-win for everybody. The Corporate Social Opportunity Zone, I believe, is a very important platform going forward. It has provided the opportunities to debate, dialogue, and discuss the challenges and opportunities of the issues that we're facing. If we come together, I think there's a very strong case for making a point, a pledge, and a pitch that might well be taken seriously. And as a result, that's what I believe the potential is on the basis of where we've reached now. Because we're only in a 2-year infancy of a journey in this particular effort of work. But how do we do that? I'd asked, again, most of the contributors as to where social media fitted in to their particular way of engaging, not only with this audience, but the wider global community. Because one thing we do have is a democracy of 2 clicks. If someone is interested individually or collaboratively or collectively, they click and they are engaged. What was our collective Twitter currency? Most sponsors will not engage unless they know what your social media traffic is. And on that basis, they work out a marketing, a special project, and a potential charitable donation that reflects their spend and what they would seek in corporate social responsibility. But the corporate social investment would suggest, where is our platform where we can campaign, where we can contribute our efforts, and where we can secure the type of resources we're coming from and aiming to get to. Code for Youth is that. It's something that I felt reflected the youth charter philosophy of a genuine partnership and relationship that is ongoing and that has us as a unified effort using social media, as I've said, to promote what we wish to do, to provide the evidence, and to equally attract what we need to do, what we are committed to doing. It has been a code that allows the social connectivity to respective websites, which all a CSO contributing exhibitor movement would have. Code culture, you've all been coded and scanned as you've come into Soccerex. We would be using that technology to allow people to donate and institutions to donate through that platform, as well as provide the evidence of what we do, the research, the anecdotal evidence, which is strong, the case study evidence, but underpin it with the social, cultural, and economic framework of outputs and outcomes. I don't want to get too technically into a language that you might suggest, what's he on about? But let's say when you do click now, there's a lot of infrastructure that gives you the information that you need to give you confidence that your money, donated or invested, is being used wisely and properly and efficiently. It allows you to donate wherever you are on whatever cause you feel you might want to contribute to. So if there was a specific wish to contribute to youth employment, or on a sporting memories network, because that was the issue or trend of the time, or the European disability effort, you would be able to do that. If it was the school's education effort, if it was the humanitarian work, find a better way. What I'm saying is we would be able to individually work out what the donations are, so the independence is maintained, but collectively pull all of that currency of data and present whatever it might need to look for. The one thing I want to add with regards to Coaches for Hope is unless we have coaches, we do not have participation. We do not have the strength and depth that we can draw from and develop young people for life, both on the pitch and off the pitch. But Code for Youth will be an opportunity to do just that. There's a little bit of footage I want to share with you. It gives me a chance to pause for you to absorb what I'm trying to download and share with you, and see if the software between your ears is beginning to engage, and Wi-Fi and all the stuff my youngsters tell me about, but I'm still trying to keep up with. Hopefully you like the music. Fred is just a name we thought we'd give that fictional infographic, because I thought it was a nice name. But hopefully we'll have got a further insight of MSM's support for our efforts in trying to give you a feel of what we would hopefully use to activate this movement. Technology is greatly having a massive influence in our lives, and we believe Code for Youth can help rebalance the imbalance in meeting the challenges, as well as hopefully provide an opportunity that will see us as a movement, as a sector, attract what we need to do collectively and collaboratively, and then be able to get on with the real daytime job of engaging, equipping, and empowering the young people and communities that we wish to help. irrespective of what they look like, where they come from, what they believe in, and what they sound like. When I took on board the Youth Charter 22 years ago from a community in Moss Side, only 2 minutes away, it was from a tragedy of a young schoolboy. His name was Benji Stanley. He was a 14-year-old schoolboy who supported Manchester City Football Club. He was never able to live out his dreams because the disaffection and no hope saw a culture, a gang culture, begun all too often, an unwanted presence in the lives of communities. And this is a global phenomenon, because favelas, townships, projects, disadvantaged communities are the very communities, as I've said, where most of our soccer greats will have come from. J.J. Okocha commented in the Legends seminar with the Qatar World Cup host organising committee that football was simply something for them to do and keep them out of trouble. It was what kept me out of trouble, and there were coaches that could inspire me. It is absolutely critical, and fortuitously in the same time of that tragedy, the New South Africa, the late President Mandela's vision for sport for the New South Africa, saw me be given the privilege and opportunity to contribute to that. So the Youth Charter is very much a combination of a global effort and very much reflecting an African footprint, because over there they have no fundraising. The social coaches have been inspired by extraordinary people doing extraordinary things for extraordinary reasons. And they do it because it is first and foremost life important before it even becomes about the winning and even about the taking part. So the Youth Charter Scroll is something I'm responsible for and to. It is something that is shared and reflects our movement. So I'm hoping that Code for Youth will provide an opportunity to bring us together. We might be able to debate, discuss and dialogue how we might be able to take and present and secure what we need in order to provide something for all. I'm going to shut up now. I'd welcome questions, challenges, thoughts on what you've heard, what you think. Has it made sense or hasn't it been made sense?
Hi, good morning, Jeff.
Good morning.
Fantastic presentation. Totally agree with you in terms of the collaboration. Kids Fitness First is a newly formed organisation, so we haven't got the same level of experience and track record as your good self. However, I do agree that the collaboration is something that I've seen here at this exhibition could be very, very successful for all of us. I would like to just ask the question, does anybody know exactly what level of funding is actually donated each year by the players themselves? I know many have set up foundations of their own, but there's probably 50% of them that have not set up foundations. And how much, basically, in terms of dollars, it's $1 billion industry, how much in terms of dollars is actually contributed to social responsibility projects? Thank you.
And you'd like an answer to all of the aforementioned. Firstly, players. A lot of players do a lot of good via their agents. A foundation is now part of the branding and the overall, I think, presence of the 21st century footballer. However, over the last number of years of what I've witnessed, if we look at the Premier League as an example, they have the Premier League Foundation. You then have the England Players charity. You then have all the Premiership clubs who have their foundations, and it goes on and on and on. We're now looking at a socioeconomic impact model that suggests what are the economics currently being employed in our communities. Because as I was to experience with an economist and some investment bankers, they felt on the proposition of what we do, the return we provide, whilst anecdotal and very good case studies, it's not fit for purpose. The real social, cultural, and economic impact of outputs, numbers, outcomes. I'm more of an outcomes-driven person. We do need the throughput, but you need to be able to sustain that throughput with outcomes that are sustainable, credible, and give confidence. Financial investment comes with confidence. Our global markets are affected by a shift and lack of confidence in one continent that sees a run on the market. We believe to underpin and sustain it, we need the players, the clubs, and the major institutions of football or soccer turning what isn't $1 billion dollar industry, but a multi-billion industry, into something that says, I'll give you an example. In arms deals, it's a widely accepted fact, when an arms deal is negotiated, a social offset is made available for schools, hospitals, and such like. I was very naively allowed to be in on a meeting and suggested we might need a little bit more. We got a sports centre out of it, and it was in South Africa, and I just felt I was able to secure something a little bit more than what was being considered. There is money, and there's big money. What I'm suggesting is we go for the big money, take the crumbs of that big money, and then do some magic with it. But I would equally defend the players. I think far too often, very few of them, unless they're retired, actually get into this work. Quinton Fortune was supposed to be here. He's had to go to Carrington. Quinton Fortune is an excellent example of what I'm talking about, as somebody that came from the townships of South Africa, managed as part of the Sasol Under-23 Olympic squad, came to the streets of Moss Side as part of the Swabby Charlton soccer schools, Ray Whelan equally being part of that effort, and that saw him play for Manchester United. He's now working with the United Foundation, works with Future Champions, a legacy of the 2010 FIFA World Cup in South Africa. By the way, all of the controversy around South Africa should not be South Africa-centric. It is a global soccer issue and should be addressed accordingly. And I think, again, it's because these not too clear areas are blurred. We haven't got a clear framework, a clear covenant, a legacy covenant that actually sees a genuine benefit from bid, host, and legacy effort into a real socially, culturally tangible youth and community engagement. The Qatar host organising committee are already doing this work, and I'm very encouraged by certainly the discussions I've been having as to what they see as being absolutely critical, and of quite rightfully taking the Middle East and bringing them as part of the global soccer community, but addressing the wider issues of youth engagement globally. But I think in long answer to a very, very good question, the economics are there. It's a case of making the right case and the right proposition, and then delivering what is called impact and execution.
Thanks. I also thought it was a really good presentation and fascinating slideshow. I'd love to get a copy of that. And I think one of the things it really highlights for me is that very often those of us in this CSO zone are just expected to get the crumbs and to be grateful for the crumbs. And really we need a bigger slice of the cake. And the question is, how do we get that? And when you look at the figures you put up there in terms of the transfer fee example, it makes me feel that actually what we should be talking about is not so much charity as such, but about some social justice and about what we as a society really want to achieve for our young people. And I was at a really good conference earlier this year in Washington, which looked at, it was the US Soccer Foundation, and it looked at adverse childhood experiences for under fives in the US and research around the impact of neglect and abuse on small children, how completely sort of permanent that is, how damaging it is, and how little is being done in the States to counteract that. And obviously that's probably equally a problem here. And I think if we were able, as you're promoting and suggesting, to be a much more collaborative force to be reckoned with within our sector, in the sport or football for good sector, whatever you want to call it, the UK centric, I think then we'd have some real bargaining power. We could go to the table of some of the big corporates and some of the exhibitors here who, let's frankly, haven't really come into our zone, let's be honest, and we're not at the big stage where we should be making a presentation to, dozens of people rather than kind of talking to ourselves a little bit here. Like in my session yesterday, there was probably 10 people, all of whom I knew. It was nice, but it wasn't like reaching new people. And I think, it's great that we're getting this space at Soccerex, but it's just not big enough. It's just too tokenistic. And I think whilst we're all fragmented and stuck in our own little pods, it will remain so. So if there's any way in which we could support your leadership in this, I'd be very happy to discuss that. I think it's very much a needed initiative.
Jane, thanks for your positive feedback, as well as highlighting, as I said, the challenges that we face, but what I still believe are opportunities. Unless the Soccerex organisers in Duncan and Rita had actually afforded me the opportunity at the FIFA World Cup in France all those years back, we wouldn't be where we are now. It was a platform. I learned, and you're meeting one of the most impatient individuals you've ever met, I learned it's a long, arduous journey and struggle. Yes, I would prefer to be in the academy, Yes, there would be a three-line whip as they come through. I'm quite an inspiring but at the same time intimidating individual. I'm sure I could convince them on the benefits and merits of why they should have something to listen to, but actually hear and feel, because you're quite right. This isn't for those who are just looking for a short-term return. This is a long-term relationship. And I think on the basis of what we have and what I realized very much, I think, after London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games, are very successful games. We're now looking to inspire a generation. We're now looking at a sports strategy consultation. And I know how much bid documentation and research was done in the lead up, including those games. So I really do get concerned on the basis that we have no inactivity, because we've not been able to recognize that the most activity young people are prepared to undertake is social interaction, multimedia interaction. And unless we can captivate and utilize for all the right reasons those platforms and provide that blend, as you said, education with mobile, with activity, we are going to struggle. By the way, most of the young people's insight is what saw me suggested we're going to tweet for youth, code for youth. It's all going to be a series and a theme. But yeah, we are being, as it were, given a sideshow presence of what we'd like to be taken more seriously. But I would suggest if we were to pursue this one major step, I think, of collaboration, I'd be interested to see what next year might look like on the basis of who would say no to us. By the way, collective leadership means you lead from the front, from the side, and from behind. Visibly invisible, but only surfacing when you have to, and for the right reasons, and for the right purpose. But I think being at the top table, and there are Prince Ali, who I again would advocate as a potential FIFA president, brings a genuine wish to see reform and change. He is equally aware and committed to this type of change because he sees the need for global youth culture to actually start to understand their rights and responsibilities as global citizens. But the inequalities that would suggest, as I said, that these sustainable millennium goals are something for the African continent, than to suggest that in other continents, the educational health attainment needs, the civil and social order, the environment in which they are a product of, and the communities that need to be safe should be intergenerational, but ultimately underpinned by vocation, training, employment, and enterprise. If we don't have, we have coined a term social coach, someone who brings first and foremost the development of the mental, emotional, and physical literacy of the individual. Once you get that right in characteristics and behaviors, you will get performance. And for me, that performance can be whatever it looks like. So 20 community campuses, 10,000 social coaches, with I think we costed it all just under £500 million. We've converted into whatever currency you want on each of the continents, and underpinned. Chinese government, the Premier, China likes football. $48 billion is what the Chinese government is investing in football, in soccer. It is now compulsory in every single Chinese school. So I'd be just saying, from a strictly Eurocentric standpoint, I think I know where the next powerhouse of football will be. Quite simply, that the investment that's been made is not just about the top of the pyramid. The Chinese work on 100-year strategies. They're going to develop a very strong social and cultural participative platform, develop the character that says family, community, country, and then grow it. So at the very top, and not forgetting, notwithstanding, that the days of a national team reflecting the national identity of that team are over. Football is truly global, but I would argue we are drawing on a very limited participation pool. Young people are being seduced and attracted on rather more other, let's just say, enticing potential sources of realizing what they might want to achieve with 2 clicks. So again, it really does, I suppose, lend on us to be able to make that type of argument. And if we just had a proposition that was placed to every delegate and sought their response, and we knew what that was, that would be a good starting point. As I've said, 4 quarterly platforms, and that's what we'll be doing. This is the social, cultural, and economic impact of each of our respective organisations. If there's a lead issue, you become the lead issue, and we support you in delivering that lead issue. But I know this, there's no one single agency who can go into a 21st community globally and deliver that local offer on their own. I've learned that if silence sees nothing more by way of what's been shared, which has been, even by my own standards, a lot. If I could just say to you, this ball came as a result of an email. We get many emails from all over the world with some quite extraordinary, innovative, creative, entrepreneurial opportunities. Alive and kicking are from Kenya. I spoke to them last week, and they had this delivered in 4 days. It has all of the sustainable development goals, and it's a ball that there are far more technical balls produced now that flight and swerve and curl, but I thought this was the best example of what we should be about. It's a social enterprise, and it already, for me, should be in every school, and linked to this would be your education pack that would have all the worksheets of each of the respective organisations, and we would have a digital offer as well. By the way, those who think that there are communities in the developing countries, and I use that word very guardedly, I do not believe in a developing or a developed country. The BRICS movement is already showing those countries that were seen as third world will be first world soon, quite simply because they are the new markets. But their social, digital technology and experience is arguably second to none. And through a social media campaign, something like that starts to become real. But they can actually put whatever logos you want on it. That's how creative they are. And they're putting that money back into the schools and into the young men and women that they're trying to actually improve by way of life chance. So there are many, many, many ways in which we can work, but we have to work together. So I'd like to thank you for taking the time. Soccerex 2015, I believe, by way of Soccerex 2016, I'm told by Mexico and Ghana, is that they will be challenging environments. We have very good links with those NGOs in working in those environments. There are strong social and cultural challenges faced by the young people in those countries. I think even if we can't get there, we'll have the social platforms and mediums to be able to communicate what we're doing and be able to affect real and potentially lasting change. So Code for Youth is officially launched. What it does next is up to you. All I will have been is able to share my conscience is clear. The responsibility I was given is now shared, and I have to do this with an emotional discipline. Today was the death of a 17-year-old, Jesse James. He was a 16-year-old Manchester City supporter with an exceptional sporting potential. He was gunned down 3 minutes away. I had to share that with you.